Welcome back to our story channel. Please subscribe to our channel and state your country you are watching from. Let's continue. Part 1. The Harmattan Wind. The Harmattan wind, a dry, dusty breath from the Sahara, whipped across the tarmac of Ouagadougou International Airport, carrying with it the scent of sand and distant fires. Lieutenant Michael Langley, a rising star in the U.S. State Department's Africa Bureau, stepped off the Gulfstream jet, his tailored suit feeling suddenly inadequate against the raw, elemental force. He adjusted his tie, a nervous habit, and descended the stairs, his eyes scanning the welcoming party. Langley was a man of meticulous preparation. He had devoured briefing books on Burkina Faso's history, its volatile political landscape, and the enigmatic figure of Captain Ibrahim Traore, the young military leader who had seized power the previous year. He knew the statistics, the poverty rate, the literacy levels, the security challenges posed by jihadist groups operating in the Sahel region. He knew the diplomatic talking points, the carefully constructed phrases designed to convey support while subtly pushing for democratic reforms. But none of that could truly prepare him for the reality that unfolded before him. Instead of the stiff formality he expected, the welcoming party was a vibrant tapestry of color and sound. Traditional dancers, their bodies painted in ochre and indigo, swayed to the rhythm of drums and balafons. Women in brightly patterned boubous offered him cola nuts, a symbol of welcome and friendship. A contingent of soldiers, clad in fatigues and sporting red berets, stood at attention, their faces impassive but their eyes sharp and watchful. At the front of the line stood a man who did not fit Langley's preconceived image of a revolutionary leader. Captain Traore was younger than Langley had imagined, barely 30, with a lean, almost ascetic build. He wore a simple military uniform, devoid of ostentatious decorations. His gaze was intense, unwavering, and held a hint of weariness that belied his youth. "Lieutenant Langley," Traore said, his voice surprisingly soft, as he extended his hand. "Welcome to Burkina Faso. We appreciate you making the journey." Langley returned the handshake, surprised by the strength in Traore's grip. "Mr. President," he replied, "it's an honor to be here. Thank you for your hospitality." The formalities were brief. Langley was whisked away in a heavily armored SUV, the convoy snaking its way through the bustling streets of Ouagadougou. The city was a kaleidoscope of sights and sounds, motorbikes weaving through traffic, vendors hawking their wares, the calls to prayer echoing from the minarets of mosques. It was a city teeming with life, but also a city marked by poverty and inequality. As they drove, Langley studied the faces of the people they passed. He saw hope, resilience, and a deep-seated sense of pride. But he also saw worry, etched into the lines around their eyes, a reflection of the instability and uncertainty that had plagued Burkina Faso for years. The convoy arrived at the presidential palace, a sprawling complex of whitewashed buildings surrounded by high walls and guarded by heavily armed soldiers. Langley was led to his suite, a tastefully decorated room that offered a stark contrast to the poverty he had witnessed outside. He unpacked, showered, and changed into a fresh suit, trying to shake off the weariness of the long flight and the disorienting sensory overload of his arrival. He looked at himself in the mirror. He saw a man on a mission, a representative of a powerful nation, tasked with navigating a complex and delicate situation. But he also saw a man who was beginning to question the assumptions and preconceptions he had brought with him. Part 2. Shadows of the Past. Langley's first official meeting with President Traore was scheduled for that evening. He spent the afternoon reviewing his notes, refining his talking points, and mentally rehearsing the delicate dance of diplomacy. He knew that Traore was a complex and unpredictable figure, a man who had risen to power through a military coup but who also claimed to be a champion of the people. He also knew that Traore was deeply suspicious of Western powers, particularly the United States and France, whom he saw as having a long history of exploiting Africa's resources and interfering in its internal affairs. Langley's mission was to build trust, to convince Traore that the United States was genuinely interested in supporting Burkina Faso's development and stability, and to subtly steer him towards a path of democratic governance. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the city, Langley was escorted to Traore's office. The room was surprisingly Spartan, furnished with a simple desk, a few chairs, and a large map of Burkina Faso hanging on the wall. Traoré was seated behind the desk, his face illuminated by the soft glow of a desk lamp. "Lieutenant Langley," Traoré said, rising to greet him. "Thank you for coming. Please, sit down." The meeting began with the usual pleasantries, the exchange of diplomatic niceties. But Langley quickly sensed that Traoré was not interested in small talk. He was a man of action, a man who wanted to cut to the chase. "Mr. President," Langley began, "I want to reiterate the United States' commitment to supporting Burkina Faso's development and stability. We recognize the challenges you face, particularly the threat posed by terrorist groups operating in the Sahel region. We are prepared to offer assistance in the form of security training, intelligence sharing, and humanitarian aid." Traoré listened intently, his gaze unwavering. When Langley finished, he paused for a moment before speaking. "Lieutenant," he said, "I appreciate your offer of assistance. But I must be frank with you. We are wary of foreign interference. We have seen what happens when Western powers come to Africa with their promises of aid and support. Too often, those promises come with strings attached. Too often, they are used as a pretext for exploiting our resources and undermining our sovereignty." Langley nodded, acknowledging Traoré's concerns. "Mr. President," he said, "I understand your skepticism. But I assure you that the United States' intentions are genuine. We believe that a stable and prosperous Burkina Faso is in the best interests of the entire region. We are not seeking to impose our will on you. We are simply offering our assistance in a spirit of partnership and mutual respect." Traoré studied Langley for a long moment, as if trying to gauge the sincerity of his words. "Lieutenant," he said finally, "I am willing to listen. But you must understand that we are charting our own course. We are not beholden to any foreign power. We are determined to build a better future for our people, a future free from poverty, inequality, and violence." The conversation continued for several hours, covering a wide range of topics: security, development, governance, and regional politics. Langley was impressed by Traoré's intelligence, his passion, and his deep-seated commitment to his country. But he was also struck by his distrust of the West and his determination to pursue a radical, anti-imperialist agenda. As the meeting drew to a close, Langley sensed that he had made some progress in building trust. But he also knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult. He was dealing with a man who was not easily swayed, a man who was determined to forge his own path, regardless of the consequences. Part 3: A Walk Through the City. The next day, Langley requested an opportunity to see Ouagadougou beyond the confines of the presidential palace. He wanted to experience the city, to meet its people, and to gain a deeper understanding of the challenges they faced. Traoré agreed to the request, assigning a young aide, Captain Mariam Sissoko, to accompany him. Sissoko was a rising star in the Burkina military, a sharp, intelligent woman who had earned Traoré's trust. She was also fiercely patriotic and deeply committed to his vision for Burkina Faso. As they drove through the city, Sissoko pointed out the landmarks: the Grand Mosque, the Ouagadougou Cathedral, the Musée National. But she also showed him the areas of poverty and neglect, the sprawling slums, the overcrowded schools, the dilapidated hospitals. "Lieutenant," she said, "you see the challenges we face. We are a poor country, with limited resources. But we are determined to overcome these challenges. We are determined to build a better future for our children." Langley was impressed by Sissoko's dedication and her unwavering belief in Traoré's leadership. But he also sensed a certain naivete, a lack of understanding of the complexities of international politics and the limitations of Traoré's radical agenda. They stopped at a local market, a bustling hub of activity where vendors hawked everything from fresh produce to handcrafted goods. Langley was immediately struck by the energy and vibrancy of the place. He watched as women bargained for goods, as children played in the dusty streets, as men gathered to drink tea and discuss politics. He bought a handcrafted wooden mask from a local artisan, a symbol of the rich cultural heritage of Burkina Faso. As he paid for the mask, he struck up a conversation with the artisan, a wizened old man with a twinkle in his eye. "Welcome to Burkina Faso, my friend," the artisan said. I hope you enjoy your stay. Thank you, Langley replied. I am learning a lot about your country. Burkina Faso, the artisan said with a sigh. We have seen many changes over the years. We have had good times and bad times. But we have always survived. We are a resilient people. He paused for a moment, as if lost in thought. I hope that Captain Traore will bring us good times, he said finally. He is a young man, full of energy and ideas. But he must be careful. Power can corrupt even the best of men. Langley nodded, struck by the wisdom of the old man's words. He realized that the people of Burkina Faso were not simply passive recipients of Traoré's policies. They were active participants in their own destiny, with their own hopes, fears, and aspirations. As they left the market, Langley asked Sissoko about the challenges facing the country. She spoke candidly about the poverty, the corruption, and the security threats. But she also spoke about the progress that had been made under Traoré's leadership, the improvements in education, the expansion of healthcare, and the efforts to combat corruption. Lieutenant, she said, Captain Traore is not a perfect man. But he is a good man. He is a man who cares deeply about his country and his people. He is determined to make a difference. Langley listened, trying to reconcile Sissoko's idealistic vision with the harsh realities he had witnessed. He realized that Traoré's revolution was more than just a political movement. It was a social and cultural phenomenon, a reflection of the deep-seated desire for change that had been simmering in Burkina Faso for years. Part 4: The Weight of History. In the evening, Traoré invited Langley to a private dinner at his residence. The atmosphere was more relaxed than their previous meeting, and the conversation flowed more freely. Traoré spoke about his childhood, his upbringing in a rural village, and his experiences in the military. He spoke about his disillusionment with the previous government, its corruption, its incompetence, and its failure to address the needs of the people. He spoke about his decision to seize power, his belief that it was the only way to save Burkina Faso from collapse. Lieutenant, he said, I did not seek power. I did not want to be president. But I felt that I had a duty to act. I could not stand by and watch my country fall apart. Langley listened, trying to understand the motivations that had driven Traoré to take such a drastic step. He realized that Traoré was not simply a power-hungry dictator. He was a man who genuinely believed that he was acting in the best interests of his country. But Langley also knew that Traoré's methods were deeply problematic. His coup had destabilized the country, alienated Western powers, and emboldened jihadist groups operating in the region. His radical policies had disrupted the economy, scared away foreign investors, and created widespread discontent. Mr. President, Langley said, I understand your desire to improve the lives of your people. But I am concerned about the direction your country is heading. Your policies are isolating Burkina Faso from the international community. They are undermining the economy and creating instability. Traoré listened intently, his expression unreadable. Lieutenant, he said finally, I am not afraid of isolation. I am not afraid of criticism. I am only afraid of failing my people. I am determined to build a better future for Burkina Faso, even if it means going against the wishes of the Western powers. The conversation continued late into the night, covering a wide range of topics. Langley and Traoré debated the merits of different economic models, the role of foreign aid, and the challenges of combating terrorism. They disagreed on many points, but they also found common ground. They both shared a desire to create a more just and equitable world, a world free from poverty, inequality, and violence. As the evening drew to a close, Langley realized that he had developed a grudging respect for Traoré. He admired his courage, his conviction, and his unwavering commitment to his country. But he also recognized the dangers of his radical agenda and the potential for his revolution to spiral out of control. Part 5: The Crossroads. The final day of Langley's visit was marked by a sense of urgency and anticipation. He knew that the next few hours would be crucial in determining the future of the relationship between the United States and Burkina Faso. He had one final meeting scheduled with Traoré, a chance to lay out his proposals, to address his concerns, and to try to persuade him to reconsider his policies. He spent the morning preparing for the meeting, reviewing his notes, and refining his arguments. He knew that he had to be persuasive, but he also had to be respectful. He had to find a way to bridge the gap between their two worldviews, to find common ground on which to build a lasting partnership. As he walked into Traoré's office, he sensed a change in the atmosphere. Traoré was more reserved, more guarded than he had been in their previous meetings. He greeted Langley with a perfunctory handshake and gestured for him to sit down. "Lieutenant," Traoré said, "I have been giving a lot of thought to our conversations. I appreciate your willingness to listen to my concerns and to offer your assistance. But I must be honest with you. I am not convinced that the United States is truly interested in helping Burkina Faso. I believe that you are primarily concerned with protecting your own interests, with maintaining your dominance in the region." Langley nodded, acknowledging Traoré's skepticism. "Mr. President," he said, "I understand your concerns. But I assure you that the United States' intentions are genuine. We believe that a stable and prosperous Burkina Faso is in the best interests of the entire region. We are prepared to offer our assistance without any strings attached." He then laid out his proposals, a comprehensive package of security assistance, economic aid, and diplomatic support. He emphasized that the United States was not seeking to impose its will on Burkina Faso. It was simply offering its assistance in a spirit of partnership and mutual respect. Traoré listened intently, his expression unreadable. When Langley finished, he paused for a long moment before speaking. "Lieutenant," he said finally, "your proposals are generous. But I cannot accept them. I cannot accept any assistance that comes with conditions. I cannot accept any interference in our internal affairs. We are determined to chart our own course, to build a better future for our people, without the help of foreign powers." Langley was disappointed, but not surprised. He had known that Traoré was a stubborn and independent man. He had known that he was unlikely to compromise on his principles. "Mr. President," Langley said, "I respect your decision. But I believe that you are making a mistake. I believe that you are isolating your country and undermining its future." Traoré shook his head. "Lieutenant," he said, "I do not fear isolation. I do not fear criticism. I only fear failing my people. I am determined to build a better future for Burkina Faso, even if it means standing alone." The meeting ended on a somber note. Langley knew that he had failed to achieve his primary objective. He had failed to persuade Traoré to reconsider his policies. He had failed to build a lasting partnership between the United States and Burkina Faso. As he prepared to leave Ouagadougou, Langley reflected on his experiences. He had learned a lot about Burkina Faso, about its people, its culture, and its challenges. He had gained a deeper understanding of the complexities of African politics and the limitations of Western power. He had also learned a lot about himself. He had discovered that he was more adaptable, more resilient, and more open-minded than he had previously thought. He had learned to question his own assumptions, to challenge his own preconceptions, and to see the world from a different perspective. As the Gulfstream jet took off from Ouagadougou International Airport, Langley looked out the window at the city below. The Harmattan wind was still blowing, carrying with it the dust and the dreams of a nation struggling to find its way. He knew that the future of Burkina Faso was uncertain. But he also knew that the spirit of its people was strong, and that they would continue to fight for a better tomorrow. Part 6. The Seeds of Doubt. Back in Washington, D.C., Langley found himself facing the consequences of his unsuccessful mission. His superiors at the State Department were disappointed with his lack of progress and questioned his judgment. Some accused him of being too sympathetic to Traoré's radical agenda. Others suggested that he had been outmaneuvered by a shrewd and experienced politician. Langley defended his approach, arguing that Traoré was a complex and principled leader who deserved to be taken seriously. He maintained that the United States had a moral obligation to engage with Burkina Faso, even if it meant disagreeing with its policies. But his arguments fell on deaf ears. The prevailing view in Washington was that Traoré was a dangerous and unpredictable figure who posed a threat to regional stability. The decision was made to scale back U.S. engagement with Burkina Faso, to suspend aid programs, and to impose sanctions on key government officials. Langley was deeply troubled by this decision. He believed that it would only serve to isolate Burkina Faso further, to strengthen Traoré's resolve, and to push the country closer to the brink of collapse. He feared that it would create a self-fulfilling prophecy, confirming Traoré's suspicions about Western powers and undermining any chance of future cooperation. He considered resigning from the State Department, but he ultimately decided against it. He realized that walking away would not solve anything. It would simply leave the field open to those who favored a more confrontational approach. Instead, he resolved to continue to advocate for a more nuanced and engagement-based policy towards Burkina Faso. He knew that it would be an uphill battle, but he was determined to keep trying. He believed that the future of Burkina Faso, and the future of the entire Sahel region, depended on it. In the months that followed, Langley continued to follow events in Burkina Faso closely. He read reports, analyzed data, and spoke to contacts on the ground. He watched as Traoré's government struggled to maintain control, as the security situation deteriorated, and as the economy teetered on the edge of collapse. He saw the cracks beginning to appear in Traoré's revolution. The initial enthusiasm had waned, replaced by disillusionment and discontent. The people of Burkina Faso were growing tired of the constant instability, the economic hardship, and the lack of progress. Langley began to wonder if he had been wrong about Traoré. Perhaps he had been too naive, too idealistic. Perhaps he had underestimated the challenges facing Burkina Faso and the difficulty of implementing radical change. He also began to question his own motives. Had he been driven by a genuine desire to help Burkina Faso, or had he been motivated by a desire to prove himself, to advance his career, and to make a name for himself in the world of diplomacy? He realized that he had no easy answers to these questions. He was a man caught in the middle, torn between his ideals and his ambitions, between his desire to make a difference and his fear of failure. Part 7: The Whispers of Discontent. A year passed. The situation in Burkina Faso worsened. The jihadist groups expanded their operations, seizing control of vast swathes of territory. The economy continued its downward spiral, pushing more and more people into poverty. Traoré's government grew increasingly authoritarian, cracking down on dissent and silencing critics. Langley watched with growing alarm as the country he had come to care about teetered on the brink of collapse. He knew that something had to be done, but he was unsure what. He had lost faith in Traoré's leadership, but he also feared the consequences of a violent overthrow of his government. He began to explore alternative solutions, seeking out contacts within the Burkina diaspora, engaging with civil society organizations, and reaching out to regional leaders. He wanted to find a way to promote a peaceful transition to democracy, a way to stabilize the country and prevent it from descending into chaos. He knew that it would not be easy. The situation was complex, the stakes were high, and the risks were enormous. But he was determined to try. He believed that the people of Burkina Faso deserved a better future, a future free from violence, oppression, and poverty. One evening, Langley received a phone call from Captain Sissoko, Traoré's former aide. She had left the government several months earlier, disillusioned with Traoré's increasingly authoritarian style of leadership. "Lieutenant Langley," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need your help. The situation in Burkina Faso is critical. Captain Traoré is losing control. The country is on the verge of collapse." Langley listened intently as Sissoko described the growing discontent within the military, the widespread corruption within the government, and the increasing desperation of the people. "Lieutenant," she said, "I believe that Captain Traoré must step down. He is no longer fit to lead this country. But I am afraid that if he does not step down peacefully, there will be a violent coup. And that would be a disaster for Burkina Faso." Langley asked Sissoko what she thought could be done to prevent a coup. She suggested that the United States could play a role by mediating between Traoré and his opponents, by offering him a safe exit, and by providing security guarantees for a transitional government. Langley was hesitant to get involved. He knew that any intervention by the United States would be fraught with risks. It could be seen as a violation of Burkina Faso's sovereignty, it could provoke a backlash from Traoré's supporters, and it could ultimately fail to achieve its objectives. But he also knew that he could not stand idly by while Burkina Faso descended into chaos. He felt a moral obligation to act, to do whatever he could to help the people of Burkina Faso. "Captain Sissoko," he said, "I will do what I can. But I cannot promise you anything. The situation is very delicate. And I am not sure that my superiors will agree to my proposals." He hung up the phone, feeling a sense of trepidation and excitement. He knew that he was embarking on a dangerous mission, a mission that could have far-reaching consequences. But he also knew that he was doing the right thing. He was acting in the best interests of the people of Burkina Faso, and he was determined to see it through. Part 8: The Price of Power. Langley spent the next few weeks working tirelessly to convince his superiors at the State Department to support his plan. He argued that a peaceful transition to democracy was the only way to prevent a violent coup in Burkina Faso. He emphasized that the United States had a strategic interest in stabilizing the country and preventing it from becoming a haven for terrorists. He faced strong opposition from those who believed that Traoré was beyond redemption, that he should be overthrown by force, and that the United States should not get involved in the internal affairs of Burkina Faso. But he also found allies within the State Department, individuals who shared his belief that a peaceful solution was possible. Finally, after weeks of intense lobbying, he managed to secure a limited mandate to engage in back-channel negotiations with Traoré and his opponents. He was authorized to offer Traoré a safe exit, security guarantees for a transitional government, and a package of economic assistance in exchange for his resignation. Langley immediately contacted Sissoko, who put him in touch with representatives of the opposition movement. He began to negotiate with them, trying to broker an agreement that would be acceptable to all parties. The negotiations were difficult and protracted. The opposition leaders were suspicious of Traoré's intentions, and they were demanding guarantees that he would not interfere in the transition process. Traoré, on the other hand, was reluctant to relinquish power, and he was insisting on immunity from prosecution for his past actions. Langley worked tirelessly to bridge the gap between the two sides. He used his diplomatic skills to persuade them to compromise, to focus on their common interests, and to put the needs of the country ahead of their own personal ambitions. Finally, after weeks of negotiations, he managed to broker an agreement. Traoré agreed to resign in exchange for a safe exit, security guarantees, and immunity from prosecution. The opposition leaders agreed to form a transitional government that would oversee free and fair elections within 1 year. Langley breathed a sigh of relief. He had achieved the impossible. He had managed to avert a violent coup and to pave the way for a peaceful transition to democracy in Burkina Faso. But his triumph was short-lived. As Traoré prepared to announce his resignation, a faction of hardline military officers launched a coup, seizing control of the presidential palace and arresting Traoré and his supporters. Langley was devastated. He had failed. He had trusted Traoré, and Traoré had betrayed him. He had believed that a peaceful solution was possible, but he had been wrong. He watched with horror as Burkina Faso descended into chaos. The coup leaders established a brutal military dictatorship, cracking down on dissent, and plunging the country into a state of lawlessness and violence. Langley knew that he was partly responsible for what had happened. He had made mistakes. He had miscalculated. He had underestimated the forces of extremism and violence that were tearing Burkina Faso apart. He felt a deep sense of guilt and shame. He had failed the people of Burkina Faso, and he would have to live with that failure for the rest of his life. Part 9: The Price of Hope. Years passed. The military dictatorship in Burkina Faso continued to rule with an iron fist. The country remained mired in poverty, violence, and instability. Langley left the State Department and joined a non-governmental organization that worked to promote democracy and human rights in Africa. He continued to follow events in Burkina Faso closely, and he remained committed to helping the people of that country. One day, he received an email from Sissoko. She had managed to escape from Burkina Faso and was living in exile in a neighboring country. Lieutenant Langley, she wrote, I know that you are disappointed with what happened in Burkina Faso. But I want you to know that your efforts were not in vain. You planted a seed of hope in the hearts of the Burkina people. And that seed will eventually blossom. Langley was touched by Sissoko's words. He realized that even though he had failed to achieve his immediate objectives, he had still made a difference. He had shown the people of Burkina Faso that the world had not forgotten them, that there were people who cared about their plight. He resolved to continue to work for a better future for Burkina Faso, even if it meant facing setbacks and disappointments. He knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but he was. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, like, and share your thoughts.